Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Frontera, the podcast where we analyze crypto insights from frontier markets. And today we have Zach Abrams. He's the co founder of Bridge. Bridge was acquired last year by Stripe, and they've been killing it lately. And this is an episode in preparation for the Stablecoin conference that's going to happen on August 27 and 28 in Mexico City. You can visit the website that it's stablecoinconferencelatam.com, and also with the code Frontera10 you can get your tickets powered by Frontera. And yeah, I'm really happy to have Zach here. And Zach, you know that there is this joke about the stablecoin summer and the Britpop summer. I think that the headliners of the Britpop summer are Oasis, definitely, and the headliners of the stablecoin summer, it seems like it's Bridge.
I did not even know that there was a competing summer. So it kind of
Maybe I
shows you,
created.
yeah. It
It
kind
was
of
my
shows you
creation.
how
Sorry.
heads down we've been. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Dude, also talking about being heads down, a couple of weeks ago, there was this meme on Twitter about share something about yourself. And I think that you've done a lot of podcasts about Bridge, your journey. So I would advise, if people don't know what is Bridge, I would advise to listen specifically to the Empire episode. I think that one was a really great one, talking about the story, the vision. We're going to talk a lot about it also today. But I want to start with this meme that you shared about share a piece about yourself. You said that Bridge started as a consumer app, and obviously, not a lot of people know that. Tell me, what's the story behind that?
Well, so Sean and I started working on some version of Bridge in around like February, April of 2022. And this is the very tail end of the NFT sort of cycle, the last NFT cycle. So, it was almost the NFT summer. And we basically wanted to create a way to acquire NFTs, with fiat funds. And so we were imagining creating a wallet where you could link a bank account. You would be able to pay with, your this wallet. Funds would be pulled from your bank account, converted into stable coins, and then used to acquire these NFTs. So it was kind of like a consumer play, a consumer wallet play. And we basically, uh, once we started working on it, between then and when we were like somewhat close to launching, just like everything that could go wrong went wrong in the sense that, we went from, nobody being in that space to everyone being in that space. There was a huge number of competitors, and the NFT space also just completely fell over. And so we worked on it, but we never shipped it. And we very quickly pivoted into the unknown. We actually stopped working on that idea before we had an idea of what we would want to build next, which was pretty scary. I mean, Sean and I, it was probably the point at which we had the most friction in our relationship as founders, because we have been working on this thing that we wanted to ship, and the feedback you get from everyone is like, oh, just ship a product and get it out in front of consumers and iterate and so on. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to like nuke that product and start over. And I thought that we would be iterating from a place that was a pretty, had a dearth of resources. It's like if the first well you drill,
Yeah,
there's
yeah, yeah.
no oil within 100 miles. Why would you drill there? And so it put a bunch of strain on our relationship, but I think in the end, there's like no amount of arguments that go back and forth that can convince, one person or the other. In the end of the day, there was just, Sean and I had started another company. And so there was a huge amount of trust, and he kind of trusted my instincts, and we stopped and just pivoted into the unknown.
Yeah, that was one thing I was gonna mention also, that this is your second company with your co-founder, right?
Yeah, it is. It is. And a lot of people talk about how, like, starting a company is like getting into a marriage, or whatever other analogy folks want to use. And I do think that, like, to the extent you start a company and everything goes well, then, like, even a more tenuous relationship will probably work out, because you create this like immense connection through the success of whatever it is that you're starting. But our thing certainly did not go well. And the first idea didn't work. It was really stressful. We
Mm.
pivoted. We didn't know what we were going to work on for a long period of time. And so having this like well of trust and this just desire to go on the journey together is played like an enormous role for us making out the other side.
And by this time, you have already raised like an angel round. What was the fundraising situation?
Well, this was 2022, so this was like, in crypto terms, this was before Terra Luna happened,
Mm.
and this was before FTX happened. And so, an angel round at the time was big.
Yeah.
And so we had raised, a lot of money. Um, and we were, and like, I felt this like immense sense of pressure to do something valuable with that money. And actually, when we pivoted, it was by far the most stressful time, in starting the company. And I was losing sleep. I was super anxious. I wasn't like eating that well. And it was all because I felt like, we had decided to go on this journey, and this first idea was bad, and investors had trusted us, and we were letting them down. And I actually called one of our investors, after we pivoted, and I called him. I was like, "Hey, you know, this idea." And I like rehearsed the call. I like talked about the call with Taylor. I'd like, because I thought it was going to be so tough. And I called him. I was like, "Hey, this is not, in this first idea. We lost confidence in it. We're pivoting. I just wanted to give you a heads up." And he was like, "Oh, I didn't think that idea was any good anyway." And
Well, I'm glad you did it.
yeah, and it was like, it was kind of the first of many lessons where, the when starting a company for me, the pressure that I put on myself is so much greater than the pressure that others, put upon us. And so oftentimes when like I'm feeling the most stress, it's generally self-induced.
Yeah.
And we've seen that play out like multiple times over. But yeah, I mean, he was like, I didn't think this was going to work. And then I was like, "Oh, we're working really hard. We're going to find a new idea in like a month, and we're going to go." And he was like, "Oh, I figured you'd probably take a year, maybe longer, to figure out what you work on." So it's just this reinforcing of my own expectations, and so I'm being so disconnected from what I perceived his expectations would be.
Yeah, I think that that's a classical story of. There's this quote about where Kobe gets asked like, what do you think about fans' expectations?" And he says like, "Fans' expectations, no one's gonna have higher expectations for me than myself, right?"
Yeah.
So I think that it's a classical way of like a founder or someone that is a top performer in their field. Like we try to put ourselves like in that amount of pressure, and then trying to move from that is kind of complex, and it's hard to see through the fog. But at the end, everything worked out. How did you landed into the stablecoin idea? Because you wanted to think for a month. How long did it take to like to get this idea really like settled down?
Yeah, I mean, even just coming back to your expectations point, I still feel that today. Like I feel, pressure. I am positive that the pressure that I put on myself, for to deliver whatever at the end of this month, or whatever at the end of the year, or for Bridge to become X or Y, is greater than whatever else is out there. And that's just sort of like a permanent. I think that's probably like Now I've like come to realize that's just like a part of building the company, that motivation kind of has to come internally from whoever is driving the product forward. If the external forces are what's driving, setting higher expectations, that's probably not a good situation to be in.
Yeah.
But how did we make our way to Bridge? So when we started this transition, this pivot away from the first idea, our one of our big takeaways was that we knew we wanted to build in the crypto space. We like fundamentally believed that this was going to be, very important financial infrastructure. But the first product was highly focused on a very crypto specific use case, which was NFTs. And so we knew going into this search that one, we wanted to work in the crypto space, but two, we wanted to build something that we thought was going to be useful and powerful outside of the sort of crypto world that existed at that moment in time. And the crypto space was very small. There's millions of people at the time probably around the world who were using crypto products, and we wanted to approach and serve much bigger markets, but we didn't know exactly what markets we wanted to solve. Over time, there was probably no like one specific insight that got us there, but maybe the accumulation of like multiple different conversations, and some of which happened well before we started the pivot. So when I was in 2019, I was at Coinbase. I was leading the consumer business at Coinbase, and at that time, we launched USDC. And at the time we didn't know how we were going to use USDC. And one of the ideas that we had was to take USDC and embed it across all of the Coinbase consumer properties and build this global consumer neobank on top of stablecoins. And we never ended up doing that, but that idea had sat there of like stablecoins as this like global bit of financial infrastructure that opened up whole new markets. And so I kind of had that sitting in the back of my mind. Then two is that we started to see some USDC and some USDT traction. And we had conversations with several other folks that made us believe that there would be multiple other stablecoins, that there was going to be this desire due to wanting to customize the actual smart contracts to access the yield, or to de-risk the reserve management for folks to want to have their own stablecoins. And then the third thing is that we saw the launch of actually Binance's stablecoin, and saw how that started to gain tons of traction. And so through the combination of this like apply this real application at Coinbase, believing in the proliferation of stablecoins, and ultimately seeing USDB launch or BUSD launch, we gained this belief that one, stablecoins would be super important, and two, there would be many of them. And those two premises were very core to Bridge. And once we had those two beliefs, we then were kind of off to the races building what ultimately became Bridge.
Okay, perfect. So basically, you went through the idea maze, and your experience at Coinbase was instrumental to understand stablecoins, the asset, how to use it as a financial infrastructure, right?
It certainly was, and but this was I left in mid 2019, so we had like just launched USDC, so it was all like hope. It was all this at the time. We never, I didn't see it through. It ultimately took much longer than I would have anticipated for USDC to be deeply embedded across all the consumer products. It took like 3-4 years for that to happen, but that was incredibly important in making this realization.
Yeah, and one thing about like getting to product market fit, as you said, for a USDC took longer, maybe because the infrastructure was not there, blockchains were not as fast as today. Also, I can see how complex the Coinbase's infrastructure in 2019 is completely different. It should be completely
Yeah.
different as today's. From wallets, how do you manage liquidity? A lot of things change. And I come to this comment because personally, I've seen a lot of companies use Bridge. As a story, I talk with a lot of founders in frontier markets, specifically in Latin America, and Bridge came a lot during different conversations. Even some people, some fellow friends that in when I was working at Bitso, they constantly were saying like Bridge is killing it, Bridge is doing great. One friend also told me like, yeah, we use Bridge like everyone else. So basically, it was like a commodity, right, for this type of technology. In Latin America specifically, that's where I have like more context about it. But I'd love to know the other side of the story, like from the insights, from Bridge. Um, could you share a little bit of information of how relevant Latin American emerging markets are for you?
Yeah, I mean, so when we started, like, we had this like inside a bridge of like, okay, stable coins will be important and there will be many of them and we can build this infrastructure and so on. And then we set off to actually build the product, which our product is a bunch of orchestration APIs that enable you to convert between fiat and stablecoins, or stablecoin to fiat, and then as part of that, issue your own stablecoins. And these core orchestration and issuance APIs, it took us a long time to build, many months to build. And we thought that the first application of these would be crypto products. And so we set out and kind of picked, the first customers, which were two crypto companies. And they were like well-funded US companies, so on. And they were our early design partners. And then in around March or so, we launched with them. And basically, both of those companies went out of business within like 2 weeks or so of launch. And then I went on Twitter and just posted that, hey, we've built this bit of infrastructure. You know, here's our website. Please come and talk to us. We desperately need someone to use the product. And through Twitter, the demand just organically started to come from Latin America. So one of the first developers that came to us was a team based in Colombia that was building a cross-border payments app. And by working with them, we began to understand the cross-border payments opportunity with stablecoins. And then we had another team come to us in Mexico who wanted to build something similar. And then we had another team come to us in Brazil. And so it was less, our sort of product market fit in LATAM was less about, our sort of foresight, that we were building this bit of infrastructure that would be really useful in this market, and more so that the builders and entrepreneurs in LATAM pulled it out of us. They came to our product and showed us what was useful and then asked us to adjust and shape the product to meet their needs. And a big pivot point for us actually came when very early on, like 3 months in maybe, when we got connected to Bitso, your old team. And we like negotiated the contract. And it was actually, some of the folks you probably know, it was like very it was a very funny experience because we were like three people at the time. And Bitso is like, the core customer that you can get in LATAM. And Nano, if you know Nano, was the
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
person that we were negotiating the contract with. And because we were like such small potatoes for them, Nano would like call me to negotiate the contract when he was like on his like scooter. You'd like hear like horns
Yeah,
beeping
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
like, and then he like pulls up to the light, he like yells at someone, and then he like yells at me, he's like, no way are we gonna pay that price, and then I'm like try or he's calling me when he's at the gym. It's just like so unimportant to him that he's just like squeezing it in between all the other all the other times that work. And we eventually signed the contract with them and launched in September, and that represented a very big inflection point for us.
How I want to have some more insight on that demand, because that started peaking, and definitely when classical thing of growth begets growth, and now you start working with the largest crypto company in Latin America, and also you're starting to work with other smaller companies across the region, and your product market fit in Latin America is expanding. And I think that something that we try to communicate a lot in Frontera is that really there are a lot of cultural things in common in Latin America specifically, but there are a lot of different use cases across the region that are completely different. So from the inside, could you walk us through like the main use cases that you've seen in Mexico, Brazil, Argentina, Colombia? What's the main thing on each market?
Yeah, and I like very strongly agree with that point. I mean, one of our, we build infrastructure for developers. And so what has always been the case for us is that, entrepreneurs, builders, enterprises come to us and they know their business and they know their end customers, and they come to us and they tell us what their end customers demand. We aren't serving those end customers, and so through working with all of these teams, we are able to understand where the stablecoin space can and should go. And this has just played out many, many, many times over. I think there are some products where you have like a very crisp view of where things need to be, and you're like, and oftentimes this is the case in like consumer products or what have you, and you're sort of pulling the space towards your view. In our case, it is that we know that there's this multitude of ways in which the stablecoin space can unfold, and these like dozens and dozens and dozens of use cases that will be discovered. And by working with developers and builders all over the world, they'll help us see these use cases. And over the last couple years, there's really like two core things that I would say today are working and very clearly working. The first is cross-border payments. And we see cross-border payments working in every way, shape, or form. So this could be like supporting Scale.ai and taking US dollars, converting them into stablecoins and paying people out all over the world. It could be working with SpaceX to take funds from LATAM and move them back into the US. Or it could be, the fiat to fiat flows. So helping a business in Europe pay a contractor in Mexico in Mexican pesos. And then the second use case that's really working is stablecoins as this global financial building block. So we've started to see neobanks and consumer and B2B fintechs build on top of stablecoins. And it is this one platform on top of which they can serve consumers in Mexico or businesses in Brazil or Argentina or what have you. And before stablecoins, you'd have to build, MXN infrastructure, then BRL infrastructure, then, Argentinian peso infrastructure, and so on. Now you can build one on top of stablecoins and use that same product to serve consumers in a bunch of different markets. We're seeing those two things clearly work. And now, as this space has been pulled forward, we're starting to see other use cases emerge, treasury use cases and bank use cases and marketplace use cases like Shopify and so on, accepting payments, and even beginning to see the hints of some agentic use cases that are all starting to come to be. But those first two use cases are the ones that are the most developed and have been the most proven by a huge number of builders all across LATAM, showing us what's possible there.
Yeah, I think that understanding the story of stable coins, some of the first powerful use cases are the ones that you just said about money movement, right?
Mhm.
Like the need to move the asset quickly on an asset that is USD denominated is fundamental. Something that I believe is that we're entering the phase of the stablecoin and crypto era where it's not just important to have quick money movement, but the blockchain as a decentralized ledger can solve a lot of reconciliation problems to big fintechs. And so we're moving from moving money to just having a common ledger that you cannot do fraud, that there are all these stories in fintech that they need to put out of their balance sheet because their banking rails do not match. I think that we're moving to that moment on stablecoins.
Yeah, I mean, very concretely, one of the ways in which almost all fintech applications are built today is like FBO accounts. You have one pooled account and then you ledger that account for every single consumer or business. And one of the things that is like super nice about building on top of blockchains and stablecoins is you get a ledger for free. I
Yeah.
worked at Coinbase and Square and so on. We have enormous teams that are just building and maintaining a ledger. And that benefit alone is extremely valuable to teams. It enables you as a team of two people to launch a neobank that would never be possible, never ever be possible to do with a team the same size.
I completely
Yeah.
agree. When I joined Bitso, they hired me to be like this payment ops manager for crypto. And 1 month in, we realized like we don't need that. Like there's no payment ops in the blockchain. We don't need to call a bank. We don't need to do reconciliation. And then I moved around. But I think that that's a specific insight that a lot of fintechs are coming to understand.
Yep.
And now I would love to talk more about your growth in frontier markets, because as I understand, Latin America is your largest market, right now.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, perfect. And you're moving, obviously scaling globally. For people that are building from different parts of the world into Latin America, I would love to hear some of the main challenges or some stories that you find that would be interesting to share. We've in Frontera we have the best essays about frontier markets, and one that we identified is that in Latin America there are big problems. There's not a lot of funding, and talent is scarce. So we're seeing teams like Bridge, like the guys at Etherfuse, that are American people building huge businesses in Latin America. So for those folks, what can you share about the region? Some interesting stories about building here.
Yeah. I mean, one example that kind of touches on your previous question of like how this market has shaped our product, and then highlights sort of some of the use cases that we're solving. So a year ago, we basically our product was the only fiat rail that we supported, or the only fiat rails that we supported were US dollars and euros. And our business was like overwhelmingly focused on the US market, and from a fiat standpoint. And one of our investors, this was sort of before the whole Stripe thing, one of our investors came to us and asked us if we were thinking about adding support for local payment methods in Mexico or Brazil or Argentina or Colombia or wherever else. And at the time, I told him, no, like we see zero demand for that. All the folks who were building on our product had already built connectivity into the local market. And so it would be like a team in Colombia who had built, direct access to COP, and we're looking for, stablecoin access in the US market, or a company like Bitso. Bitso had already built the local connectivity into Mexico, Brazil, Argentina, so on, and they were looking for stablecoin and USD or euro access. And then when the Stripe acquisition was announced, the market materially shifted, and we saw a whole new set of folks come in and start wanting to build with stablecoins. And a lot of these folks had not yet built that local connectivity. And so all of a sudden, building local support for Mexican pesos or BRL or whatever else became incredibly important. And so, just a couple weeks ago, with the help of local partners, we launched support for MXN pay-ins and payouts. Pretty soon we'll be doing the same thing in BRL, and the same thing in Argentina, and the same thing in Colombia. And it's all because a whole new set of builders are coming to create local pay in, local pay out, local products for these markets, but they need, deeper connectivity. And so, what our product is very much sort of shifting as builders come to us and seek different things that they want to build. And so that could be, before it was that Colombian business or that Colombian builder was just building in Colombia, but now that same Colombian entrepreneur wants to expand to Mexico, wants to expand to Argentina. And so I think with the help of our infrastructure, we're enabling these folks that would just be serving local markets to expand and serve across the entire region. We're also helping folks who built fintechs that want to come into LATAM to serve consumers to come in and add, storage and local pay-ins and local payouts. And so the shape of the products with the infrastructure that we've built has changed materially over time as the builders have come to us and told us, what's needed.
How do you see what's like the end state of bridge? Because this sounds a lot like, I don't know, like a Swift on the blockchain, like super fast, no T+1 settlement. Uh, all these connections is like building a global payments network or a global money movement network, not necessarily payments, but how do you see that?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think that stablecoins represent like a complete platform shift in financial services. So cards were the last really big platform shift for money. And we talk about platform shifts like mobile was a big platform shift, or AI now is a big platform shift. But these like platform shifts do not impact every space equally. For instance, like the mobile platform shift did not necessarily revolutionize healthcare, but AI is a big platform shift for the healthcare space. Financial services have their own platform shifts. The card was this enormous platform shift. It was a totally new way of moving money. And a lot of the really big fintechs were built on the back of cards, whether that's Nubank or Revolut or Stripe or what have you. And crypto represents something very similar. It is a platform shift for money, and stablecoins in particular are we think going to be like an enormous new building block on top of which a lot of existing financial services are rebuilt and a whole bunch of new financial services are created. And we think that bridge is going to play an incredibly important role there, much like you could think of like JP Morgan or something as this global bank that has created this like full stack of solutions to enable folks all over the world to deeply access global fiat infrastructure. We are doing the same thing for this new tokenized dollar infrastructure. And so we believe that we're going to, there's going to be these tokenized rails that exist globally, and that infrastructure like ours that help entrepreneurs and builders in any part of the world to access and build whatever products they want on top of these tokenized rails is going to be incredibly important, and we're going to serve them in whatever way makes sense. And we're kind of going to be this new global financial institution that provides the full stack of solutions for folks who want to build on top of these new tokenized dollars.
I think that this approach of this new infrastructure being a platform shift, it makes a lot of sense. More when you think about this is something that I was while making some like the research for the episode. Obviously, Stripe acquired Bridge, Stripe acquired Privy, so it feels like they are building or you are building this Stripeverse or like a super band of interesting crypto products. Um, Personally, I see bridge as like, I don't know, like the plumbing of the house. Maybe pre is like the house per se because they need to host the assets or something. And I think that's something that the Collison Patrick Collison or one of the brothers said. in a post or an interview. So I see how things can are being connected, like bridge being the pump making move everything, and when things don't move, they need to be hosted somewhere. That's privy. I would love to get more insight. Then again, from the inside, in the platform shift that you're thinking, definitely Stripe is like building a backbone for that. How will this infrastructure look in a couple of years? The connection between Stripe, Bridge, Privy, maybe more acquisitions to come, more products to come. What's the strategy?
Yeah, I would. Um, we view, collectively stablecoins as this really big platform shift. We think that stablecoins are this first like universal file format for money. It's open source, and we want to give people the ability to build on top of it in whatever way makes the most sense to them. And there are multiple ways in which you can access that today. And we want to support you at whatever level of abstraction makes the most sense for you and in your business. So at the bottom of the stack, there is the actual payment rails. So, we work with and partner with, blockchains and foundation teams and so on to enable folks to have the best experience if you want to build on top of Solana or Stellar or an EVM chain or Base or whatever else. A level above the actual base layer is the account, and the account is Privy. Privy sits on top of the rail itself and gives you the ability to store a balance and engage with that rail. And so if you want to interact, with this new stack at the account level, Privy is going to be the best set of the best abstraction that enables you to build whatever products you want. Bridge sits on top of the rail and on top of the account, and Bridge is like the bank. Just like a bank, we give you access to SPAY rails or ACH rails or blockchain rails or whatever else. We give you access to accounts, and we wrap it all so that you can build whatever it is you want to build. And then on top of the bank itself are all the applications, and the applications are either going to be built, some of which are being built by Stripe, which Stripe is kind of like the AWS for money. And so Stripe is enabling payment acceptance and store balances and pay-ins and payouts and all these products unique for merchants. But there's also a bunch of other teams who are building applications on top. And so we're building this stack that enables folks who want to build on this new platform to engage at whatever level makes sense.
Whenever there's a platform change, also some formats die, and it's really interesting to think about that in a payments approach. I was just thinking about this meme of how ports have changed in a MacBook. Like maybe this could be like ACH and SPAY and IBAN and I don't know, the one of Brazil that I forgot the name, and now it's only USB-C, right? Before we
Yeah,
need to
X.
have
Yep.
a, a lot of different ports to different types of input for the computer, energy, data, storage, a lot of things. How do you see that would change globally with stablecoins? Do you believe that everything will run on stablecoins? Which ports are the most important that will never die? This, because obviously if this happens, it's decades of work because it's so embedded in the global infrastructure. How do you see this evolution?
I think it's a great question, and I think if I had to guess, I would say that there will not be one stablecoin format that wins. I believe that stablecoin, there's a platform, and there will be that hundreds of thousands, millions of different stablecoins, and I think there will be a role to play for U.S. dollar stablecoins. There will be a role to play for local stablecoins. There's going to be an enormous role for like AMMs that enable the conversion between stablecoins. And so I don't think that it's all going to unify the same way those ports do around USBC. um, And so that's the way I think it will play out. What I believe will happen is that a lot of the reduction of those ports, so to speak, will happen under the hood without consumers realizing it. And I don't think people have I certainly did not have an appreciation for how complicated it is to store and move money globally. Like, I had zero appreciation for the complexities of this space. You basically have hundreds of walled gardens with all these different file formats, and there's no clean conversion mechanism when a file format needs to change. When you need to send dollars into euros, it's really complicated, or dollars into pesos, the largest remittances corridor in the world. It's extremely complicated, let alone pesos to naira. you, you know and what I think is going to happen is all this fiat infrastructure, which is literally these walled gardens, will be converted into tokenized, dollar formats, and a lot of that friction between converting between file formats will basically just go away. And it's going to enable global products in a way that was not possible before. It's going to reduce the cost of payments. And like, I saw this at Square, and we see this at Stripe. When you reduce the barriers to financial services, even very marginal reductions, shaving bits off of transactions, it creates this like whole new worlds of economic opportunity. And when you open up markets that were not possible before, now fintechs and so on can serve global audience, just like Stripe enabled merchants to sell to the world. It enables a whole bunch of like financial benefits to consumers. So that's what I'm like most excited about. That's the way I think things will unfold.
Yeah, definitely. I see a big opportunity on something like I don't know, a Zapier for payments that basically connects everything. It mixes it, and the user never knows. Uh, it's like when you go abroad and you pay with your card, you don't say, I'm off ramping USD and on ramping MXN. Basically, everything happens behind and you don't care, right? And
Yep.
we are getting close to the ending of the episode. You've been building a pretty successful company. You've worked at like top fintech and crypto companies around the world, and you have this insight that you've chatted with a lot of entrepreneurs around Latin America and other emerging markets. And whenever you do this like user research or product demonstrations, it's really easy to identify problems that they're having that you don't want to solve because it's not in my field, and I don't care that they are having problems with X because I want to focus on building bridge, right? You being Zach. Uh, but obviously, with all the product document that you have and like the payments document that you have, I would love to hear maybe two or three problems that excite you that entrepreneurs in Latin America around payments are having, because those are big opportunities for someone to build a solution around.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing I'd say is, but before going into the specifics, there is, I talked to, we just chatted a bit about sort of where the space can go, and what we think, how big we think the opportunity is going to be. And if there's one big thing I've learned in starting Bridge is that ultimately what this space ends up becoming is going to be entirely defined by what people built. And it sounds super obvious, but oftentimes we talk about spaces like it's like this inevitable march of progress. Like the space is inevitably going to go in this direction. And that's not the case. Like, people actually have to build it. And we felt that viscerally with our product and our space. Like, when we started our company, the stablecoin space was like nowhere. It was like dead. FTX collapsed. People thought crypto was dead. There was nothing going on. And like, use case by use case, we built momentum and helped some people see what was possible. And there are dozens, hundreds, thousands of teams who will do the same in all sorts of different directions for stablecoins. And ultimately, the work that folks do there will shape what this space becomes. So then specifically to your answer, so I think there are a few things. I'll give a few a few areas that I'm most interested in. Um, the first is generally just tokenization. So right now we've done a lot of work to build really good dollar tokenization in the US. And if you think about like, US dollar tokenization, we can mint and burn very large amounts. We can do it programmatically. You can do it across multiple issuers. There's really good soundness of a dollar. It's like it's very very good. And then there's like European tokenization, which is like 20% as good as US tokenization. It's you can't mint and redeem it, it's just much weaker. And then there's like the rest of the world, which is a lot of those products are even more nascent. And what we want is more tokenized dollars in more places. Like we have demand on our platform to store tokenized MXN, tokenized BRL, tokenized Argentinian peso, tokenized COP. These dollar formats need to be tokenized. There needs to be good infrastructure around that tokenization so that you can mint and redeem it really easily. Ideally, you can do that with other stable coins. And that's going to enable a whole bunch of new financial products to be built. So we're really hoping to see a lot more teams invest in that space. The second area is local connectivity. We're building with partners in Mexico and Brazil and Argentina, and we need better payment APIs and more reliable infrastructure in all of these markets. Super important for the space. Like even as more, stable coins proliferate, you're still going to need to settle into fiat in a bunch of different ways. And so that connectivity becomes very important. And then the last area is like more abstract. But one of the things that I'm really excited about is as more dollars are tokenized, you basically start to have open source money, and people can begin to build applications on top of this money in a way that wasn't possible before. And in the US, the way you build these applications is by connecting to Plaid. For those of you who know, you like Plaid is basically the wrapper on top of which money becomes programmable in the US, and it's a very weak wrapper. But that doesn't exist in a lot of markets, and so folks who can build those wrappers that enable folks to build on top of these tokenized dollars will enable even more applications to get built.
Yeah, perfect. I see them. It's really the first thing that you said, that basically people that build the products will shape the future of the industry, is basically the classical human ingenuity of how, like, one simple design decision can change the future of how money moves around the world in the next couple of years. So that's really exciting. And also it's really exciting to hear these things that you say, because there are several teams across different regions building these type of solutions. And I think that there's a big opportunity to fund these teams, and there's a big opportunity for people all around the world to come and build these things. That it's something that we've explored heavily in Frontera. And Zach, well, thank you for coming to Frontera. I think that Bridge is a big part of the stablecoin conference that's going to happen in August. We're going to be super happy to host you in Mexico City. Any final remarks, anything that you want to say before closing the episode?
No, huge thanks for having me. And anyone who wants to build with Bridge, if there's any way we can help, just visit us at bridge.xyz, and we can get you access to the APIs. Would love to build with whomever wants to build. Please visit us and help us shape what this space ultimately becomes.
Amazing. Perfect. Well, as always, subscribe to the newsletter. We're gonna post a deep analysis on the episode with Zach. And Zach, thank you for coming. You can follow me at Abraham CR, follow Frontera and Espacio Crypto, and see you next time. Thank you.
I